HARK, we are here. It is time for yet another episode of Regroup Phase. I did actually manage to get an opportunity to play some games this last week, so I'm going to report on them and showcase to you the deck that I ran. Today's video is going to be about my Anakin Bananakin Arena deck. Anakin yellow, and we'll explain the choices. We'll do the deck list, so on and so forth. Lots of fun stuff going on. It was a very interesting set of games that I played in two separate events. We'll break them down as soon as we go through the deck list. But first, let's cop this deck list. So, right off the bat, deck name, we came to rescue you. It's Anakin Skywalker at the Bananakin Arena. Why the Bananakin Arena and not just a basic yellow base? Well, the fact that Bananakin Arena is a 26 health base works in our favor because we get that extra +1 based upon each leader unit you control gaining +1/+0 from the arena effect, rather than having to lose 5 health to get that ability. So immediately on flip, regardless of any other circumstances, we're starting at a 5/7, which is pretty good for a 6 flip leader. There are other leaders that can do other things that are a little bit better. Anakin himself, the leader ability will progress our base to have a little bit more damage. If you use it 3 times, you'll be able to come out as a 6/7 right off the bat, which is another huge thing that overwhelm will help a lot. Lots of different things are going to make the flip very potent. And the fact that you get that +1 for only 4 health, if you go up to 25 damage with no more, that's 5 stacks of the +1, then the additional from Bananakin Arena, which is 6. So you can go up to a 10/7 without losing the game with the Bananakin Arena being there. It's basically just giving an extra burst of effectiveness right off the bat. A lot of cool stuff that is associated with that. It's something that I think works really well for this deck, but if you don't like the risk of 4 health, run a basic yellow base. We've got 3 copies of Force Throw. This is a semi-discard deck, so you're going to see Force Throw, Spark of Rebellion, and Senatorial Corvettes. Those are going to be your key discard cards, including K2SO. And Force Throw, if you have a Force unit on the board, also allows you to deal some damage. 2 copies of Hotshot DL44 Blaster. I think I got to pull this off once in the 8 games that I played. 3 copies of Daring Raid. This did win me a game, which is excellent. 2 copies of Spark of Rebellion. Only running 2 of these because it is a 2-cost discard instead of a 1-cost discard, and it doesn't put a unit on the board, but it does give me the ability to know what my opponent has in hand and things coming up. 3 copies of Grogu. Predominantly a yellow Force unit is why he's here. His exhaust ability does work from time to time, but I found myself kind of not really happy with him in my hand unless I had that Force Throw being able to do things on turn 2 and turn 3. 3 copies of L337. The unique part about her is the fact that she can rescue captured units, and if you don't rescue captured units, you put a shield on her, which means that she does not take damage on attack back unless your opponent attacks or gets rid of the shield when you use Anakin's ability on her, which is very, very key to what this deck wants to do. 3 copies of Surprise Strike. It's a yellow deck. It uses yellow cards. 3 copies of Anakin's Interceptor. The reason why we're running this instead of Green Squadron A-Wing is because this will at least put more damage onto the opponent's units. It has the ability to do more damage when you use it, Anakin's ability with it against the opposing ships, and is just more effective in the late game because when you do get that 15 damage on your base, it becomes a 4/3 instead of a 2/3. R2D2, 3 copies of this. Same thing, being able to, with Anakin's ability, making it a 4/4 against one of your opponent's units is very potent and very good. Having that 4 health means that it's going to be more survivable than usual, and being able to discard something you don't want from your hand to hopefully get something you do want from your hand is effective. 2 copies of Red 3. I am actually very down on this card as of late. Being a 2/3 for 3 means it's already weak on space stats. Yes, it gives all your heroism stuff +1 on attack, but that is only on attack. It is not on defense. It's not when your units are being attacked. And there's a lot of easy ways to clear Red 3 off the board, which makes it less viable for me. It does do work when it gets to stick on the board, but sometimes you pay 3 to put Red 3 on the board, and then it just evaporates immediately. We have 3 copies of Ezra Bridger, again, Force unit that allows me to use Force Throw to be able to deal damage to one of my opponent's units and also take a card out. This is one of those cool units that allows me to, at the beginning of a turn, use it with Anakin's ability to take out one of my opponent's units, or just deal 3 damage to my opponent's base, and then see if something comes off the top that's very helpful. 3 copies of Millennium Falcon, super easy to explain. It's the Millennium Falcon, you're gonna run it. 2 copies of Ahsoka Tano here. The ambush doesn't come in often, but when it does, it can be very helpful of evening out the board. It is a force unit, so it works in combination with a force throw, and I could do it again potentially if I pay the 2 to bring her back to hand, and then 3 again. This is probably one of the first cuts of the deck if you want to cut anything specific, because while she is good, basically she's 2 more copies of Ezra Bridger without being able to take a card off the top of your deck in whichever manner. 2 copies of Waylay. First change of the deck is making this 3. I lost a game against a deck that I probably shouldn't have lost to by not having the 3rd copy of Waylay to increase my chances of being able to draw it. 3 copies of K2SO, obvious good card is obviously good. 2 copies of Anakin Skywalker, I managed to get this out a couple of times, a pretty decent card. 3 copies of Senatorial Corvette, I think this might actually be one that goes down to 2, but a 5 cost 5/4 in space of Saboteur. You don't have to worry about any of your opponent's Sentinels in space like Bright Hope or the Concord Dawn Interceptors, and you can just start bashing into your opponent's base. And then when it's defeated, you can force your opponent to discard a card, which adds on to that hand disruption theme that we've got here. 3 copies of Plo Koon, one of the standout uncommons of Twilight of the Republic, and probably one of the better cards just in general from Twilight of the Republic. I'm noted to be down on Coordinate as a whole, but this deck actually keeps units on the board more often than not, being able to get that tempo against your opponent and being able to clear their units first before they can clear yours. Against control, obviously this doesn't do anything for you, but if your opponent's running aggro or mid-range, you can ambush this thing in as just a 3/6 with a force trait to trigger the additional text of force throw. Or if you do have those 2 other units on the board, you can raid 3 into something and clear off a 6 cost or 6 health unit, which is pretty good. We do have 1 copy of Wrecker here in the main board. This is actually something I'd probably pumped to 2. And then 1 copy of Mace Windu. A local used this against me when I was playing Grievous, and it is a very good card if your opponent has a wide board and you can clear out a bunch of those units with Mace Windu without having to worry about losing too much of your own health with him. You can kind of just pop a unit, pop a unit, pop a unit, clear a bunch of things off your opponent's board for 7. It's expensive, but it's a force unit and it does a pretty good job. Sideboard, we have 3 phase 1 clone troopers, the 3rd red 3, 3 Jessies, 2 Wreckers, and 1 Aura Singh. Phase 1 clone trooper was something I was thinking of dropping it on 2 and then being able to use Anakin's ability to clear out any unit my opponent has on 3, no matter what it is, unless they have a shield, because nothing has 5 health. Has more than 5 health that drops as a 3 cost or less. Nothing that I can think of. Nothing that's relevant in opponent's decks. I did have somebody use this, not specifically this combo, but a 3/2 against my Grogu with Anakin's ability that allowed them to clear it. If I can clear my opponent's Grogus, that's pretty good. The 1 extra copy of Red 3 is if I need more space presence, so I can put that into the space portion, taking out 1 copy of another 3 cost that's on the ground, maybe the Ahsoka. The 3 Jessies are actually direct. Now there are 2 of them anti-tech, because if your opponent has their 1 unit and you play Jessie on, if you have the initiative before they can get there, now there are 2 of them off, you play Jessie, now they can't use now there are 2 of them because they've got 3 units on the board, and you've got a 4/4, which becomes a 5/4 on attack that can do a bunch of work to clear out your opponent's units or just hit your opponent's base. Wrecker, Overwhelm, very good. Aura Singh, Overwhelm, very good. If your opponent attacks the base, you just ready her and can use her to snipe off another one of your opponent's units off the board. Very good, just single copy tech piece. I would probably say moving Mace into the sideboard and Wrecker into the main board, so that way I can shift around what I want to see with my tech pieces for these different things. And I'm also very tempted to just put Jessie in the main board, because even those 2 droids, unless your opponent's using a lot of exploit strategy, those 2 droids can do a lot to set up overwhelm attacks so that you can use your K2SOs, your Wreckers, your Anakin ability to be able to safely attack a unit, get that extra damage onto your opponent's base without having to give up too much of just a single attack and keeping units on your opponent's side of the board, or whatever the case may be if you want to try to just attack units instead of specifically attacking the base. So right off the bat, need to increase Waylay to 3 copies. I got to find the space for that somewhere. I do want to increase Hotshot to 3, although I'm not entirely sure of that. I do want to put Breaking In, because on the ground, Sentinels hurt a lot. And if you can Breaking In to Saboteur into a different unit with your Overwhelm, or to Breaking In to just hit the base with that Saboteur to the +2, that's very handy. I'd probably still keep Surprise Strike at 3. Taking the Senatorial Corvette down to 2, because it did get to a point where it wasn't as useful as I would prefer it to be. But honestly, the way that this deck plays and has played for me so far, I think with some extra gameplay, some extra experience in games, and seeing the lines of how a player can win with this deck, this can be a very competitive deck. I'm not going to say tier 1, but I'm going to say probably can take wins off tier 1. With the deck list here, where there will be a link to this in the description below, whether it's the changed version or the old version, it doesn't really, I don't know exactly which one's going to happen by the time I upload this, but you'll have some form of deck list of what I have used or will be using for this. So next, let's talk about what I played in games against. I played in 2 events, one 4-round event and one 1-round event. My overall score across all games played was 4-4, although realistically it probably should have been 5-3. In the first event I went to, which was on a Tuesday, this was a best of 1 event, so it actually gave me an opportunity to showcase this deck against a wide variety of deck types. So in game 1 of that event, I played against a Han Yellow. I got DJ'd twice, it didn't end up mattering. I was able to take the win against my opponent, utilizing my attacks to be able to reduce my opponent's units that were on the board, while also dealing a heavy amount of damage to the base, utilizing my overwhelm units. In best of 1, you don't get the sideboard, so my sideboard was pretty much worthless throughout the entire event, but I did get to see where things would go, and if I had more of my overwhelm units, I probably would have been able to win faster. But being able to clear cards from my opponent's hand with the various discards that I have, the overwhelms, being able to clear my opponent's units off with utilizing my units with higher damage values based upon Anakin's ability, super good, excellent moves. The second match I played, game, whatever, was against a Django Yellow. This person managed to get a Crafty Smuggler down, and now there are 2 of them down, and a Zuckuss down with that. Now there are 2 of them, and that was basically the end of the game right there. I had no way of being able to deal with that because I couldn't get my Waylays to send that Zuckuss back. I couldn't keep units on the board because my opponent could just clear them, and they managed to clear out my base pretty quickly there on after, and there was nothing I could do about it. That is a game where I would side in the Jessies and maybe even side in the Wreckers for getting to that stage where I can do a chunk of damage to my opponent's units and then overwhelm into them with whatever is necessary to be able to do that. But not having the Jessies in the main board made it so that my opponent was able to do that and I wasn't able to do anything about it. So whatever. The third game I played against was somebody who was running Tarkin Yellow, but not specifically the Derek deck. Their deck was all over the place, but what they were able to do was get a 7th Fleet Defender before I could get any of my ship stuff out, and they were able to just stick experience tokens on it, and I couldn't find any removal, any way to stop it, any way to do anything to stop it from damaging me. I couldn't even get a space unit on the board to attack into it to clear the shield and then continue attacking with other space units to clear it off the board. It just, the stuff never came up. I never saw Daring Ray to be able to ping the damage off. I never saw anything that would allow me to exhaust it like Grogu or any of these other things, or my Waylays to be able to do any of that. And that's why I need to get that 3rd copy of Waylay into the deck, so that way I don't have to worry about that crap at all. My opponent was a good player though, and they played their deck very well. I was able to help them kind of tune the deck down a little bit. There's some extra things that we can help that person build their deck with to make it even stronger and crush me even harder next time. But we'll have to see how that ends up playing out. Fun game though overall. At that point I am 1-2, and my last game goes up against a Newt Gunray Green. I was able to control my opponent's units. I did get the Waylay, so I could send one of my opponent's units back to her hand, and exploited units to be able to waste those resources. Everybody says that exploit is weak to. It's very true, it is very weak to it, but if you don't have it, that is something that's going to trouble you. So I had to save all my removal pieces, and I had to use my pieces on the board correctly. There was an early game play where my opponent exploited 2 of her droids to bring out a Droideka security, and I could have sent that back to her hand, but instead of doing that, I decided to sacrifice, I believe it was either an Ezra or an Ahsoka, to be able to, utilizing Anakin's ability to be able to ram that into the Droideka security to get it off the board, so that way I didn't have to worry about a Sentinel again and refill my board with other units after having done that, to be able to continue putting on the pressure. And when the next exploit unit came out, I was able to waylay that and then win the game from there on out. So 2-2 at a best of 1 event. I think I did reasonably well. Could have been 3-1. I had no chance whatsoever against that Django deck the way the cards came down. It is what it is. Sometimes you just lose. In a best of 3, I maybe could have taken games off by siding in some of my tech pieces and siding in some of the pieces that are important to keep. Now there are 2 of them in control, but even still making sure that I have the ability to have the initiative and play Jesse first before now there are two of them comes down is tricky, and is something that you have to pay attention to when you're dealing with that. The next day, I went to my regular local, which was supposed to be a best of 3 local, which was I was going to test this, and it ended up being that there was only one other person there. So rather than doing one best of 3 game and going home, we actually ended up doing a best of 5 match, which we cut short, or I cut short, because I wanted to keep my record a specific length. But my opponent was on Anakin ECL, so he was Bananakin, and I'm playing Bananakin, green, yellow, yada yada, blah blah. And the games went back and forth. They were pretty good. I believe I took the first one, he took the next 2, and then I took the 4th one, bringing that record to 2-2 that day, 4-4 for the week. And I just decided to cut from there because my brain was fried. But being able to see the lines and see how my opponent was playing the lines allowed me to learn a couple of extra things about my deck. My opponent did try to control my force units with his own Anakin and with ECL and other things to be able to stop the force throw from happening, but there were a couple of games where I was able to eliminate my opponent's hand with force throw and K2SO. And I don't know if the Senatorial Corvette was able to do that, but there was one game where I had a whole stack of space units and I was able to pressure forth. This deck is not a deck that can take Anakin's Interceptor Red 3, the Millennium Falcon, and Senatorial Corvette and win without doing anything about the ground arena. So that is something that I have to keep in mind when I'm playing my deck, because I can't just go space like Sabine can do sometimes and win the game, because I am not able to apply enough pressure utilizing Anakin's abilities to do that. That's just something that comes up. I can go half and half and keep a board presence on each side and kind of shift things like surprise strike or breaking in if we do that later, but Hotshot doesn't work on it, and then Anakin's ability doesn't work on it unless my opponent has units to use. But breaking in would be a good option, because that Saboteur allows me to bypass my opponent's Sentinels in space, and Bright Hope is a big trouble for a lot of space decks. Bright Hope and Concord Dawn Interceptors are probably 2 of the single best Space Sentinels in the entire game. Obviously, Devastator comes down at 10 as a Space Sentinel that blows something up and can overwhelm and all this other stuff, but that comes out at 10, and it's not a 3 cost like Concord Dawn Interceptors or 4 cost like Bright Hope. I think this deck is very good. I'm going to continue playing it. I think if I don't see the best outcome in records over the next week or so, I'll probably switch into just playing Sabine Green for the rest of the set and not worry about anything actually mattering for those types of things. This deck actually made me regret a tiny bit not signing up for any of the PQs. So when a showdown comes down, and I think I've got this deck tuned up enough, I will probably play this over any of the other choices, unless the one week I decide to play Asajj Ventress, I do that. Who knows what ends up happening with that. It's deck list that I got from a local that I might play, unsure, haven't really decided. Another great card for this deck, Bravado. I need to figure out how that fits in, even if it's just in the sideboard, and figure out how to put things in and out. That's pretty much it for the way that this came down. I like this deck a lot. I think it's really good. There's changes that need to be made, iterations that need to be made. I drew from a bunch of different sources. Tower number 9 is one source that I was able to draw most of the basic framework for the deck. Dead Body, who is a local Star Wars CCG player who also plays Unlimited, gave me some tips when I played against him in the first couple of weeks with my Grievous deck. Lots of different things that were here. I still think there's work to do on this deck. I think that this can come out to be even better than it is before. Just switching some things around. Probably still going to keep Aura, probably going to keep Mason the sideboard, 2 Wreckers in the main board, and then maybe even trade out those phase 1s for Bravados or whatever, because I don't know that the phase 1s are going to do as much work into the game as I want them to do. But I think as it stands right now, the deck list is pretty good. Just got to find some space for some cool things, for some tech, maybe run some twosies, try them out, see what happens. But there it is. That is what we've got for Anakin Yellow. Bananakin, as I like to call him. Enjoy Bananakin in your games if you wish to copy this deck list. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody. I appreciate each and every one of you for all of the support you have given me over the year. This is actually going to be my last video for the year. I'm going to take Christmas and New Year's off because there's not going to be a lot of gameplay going on, and I just, honestly, I'm a little burnt out. I'm burnt out from a lot of different things, and part of it is the fact that YouTube is the way YouTube is. You might be able to catch me on Twitch, but if you don't watch Twitch, thank you very much for joining me for this year. We'll see you in the next year in January with something. I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be something. Anyway, I ramble a lot on these videos. I got to cut some of this stuff down. Thank you for joining me. Make sure to like and comment on this video. Let me know what your favorite card in this deck is, or what your favorite version of Anakin is. Bananakin, whether it's Blue Anakin, Green Anakin, Bananakin. Appreciate each and every one of you. Subscribe to the Star Wars Unlimited channel. Got to do all the YouTube things. That's it. We'll see you in the next one, and we'll see you in the stars.